their heads were just too hard, and some were soft, but once you're in the public sphere, you have to be tough. And one day I came in, my friend, a close friend there, knew the person, the mutawwa, who was in charge of that particular district. And one day I walked in with a bottle of Sprite that I had just brought. And he said, oh, what's that? Coca-Cola? I said, oh, no, it's like Coca-Cola. It's Sprite. It's like lemon. He goes, Sprite? Ma mana Sprite? I said, Sprite, you know. And so my friend turned to me, who's also like, you know, from England. He said, yeah, well, what's Sprite? I said, Sprite is related to spirit, spirits. So he translated it. Before I realized what I said, he translated that as jinn. And so he said, jinn a'udhu billah. And then he got the kind of stick to, he reached out to grab the bottle to pour the thing. I said, no, he doesn't mean gin. It's not gin water, it's just fizzy water, like Coca-Cola. Anyway, this isn't Sprite, anyway, this has got blackcurrant in it for my sore throat. Alhamdulillah. I haven't given up on the Sprite, but those were, mashallah. Sometimes a well-intended heart, when it's not enlightened by Sharia and fiqh, it can cause more harm than good. So sometimes good intentions aren't enough if they are unenlightened with wisdom, with knowledge, with understanding. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us knowledge, wisdom and understanding. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Okay, a couple of things. I have a very sore throat and a slight fever going up and down, so I'm probably going to be low key today, and I'm going to try to make it a short circle as well. So I apologise for that. That's point one. Point two is we're probably going to take a 2-week break for the Christmas period from the Seerah classes. And so we will resume back in the first or second week of January, inshallah ta'ala. And I'm sure Dr. Salim and the masjid will send out an email or a text to remind you all when we resume. And the third thing, which Brother Ibrahim already made an announcement about, the 24th of December, this coming Wednesday, Christmas Eve, the masjid, in conjunction with the Jawziyah Institute, have organised a small seminar, an evening seminar, the title of which is Purifying Our Souls in an Age Full of Spiritual Pollution. Purifying ourselves in an age full of spiritual pollution. It's a theme that should and must apply to every single Muslim on this planet, whether they realize the importance or not. So definitely for the people of the local area, please do try to come, inshallah ta'ala. Please do encourage others to come. There'll be 2 talks. The program starts at 6:15, and then we have to break for Isha at 7:30, and then say about 7:50 again. It will continue for the second talk. So there will be two talks. The first talk will be by myself, and that will go up to Isha time, inshallah. And the second talk will be by Sheikh Ahmed Sa'ad al-Azhari, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, who is an Azhari Sheikh. And we're privileged to have him in the UK. In fact, we're even privileged to have him in the local Ilford Redbridge area now. He's kind of moved there permanently. He is, mashallah, he's a jayyid, an excellent sheikh, as you'd expect from such a prestigious religious institution as Azhar. And on top of that, it's a huge bonus that his nisbah, his family lineage, his lineage of knowledge it goes back to great ulama. His family lineage is that he's Husseini, he's from the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so he's Sayyid Husseini, and so he's from the Ahlul Bayt. So it's good to have someone who is an alim, and also he's Sayyid as well, so there's a double bonus. There's a double bonus. And thirdly, just to chuck in something good, mashallah, he's a really inspiring speaker in the English language as well. I mean, let alone Arabic, but the English language, his English is good, commanding, and you'll enjoy, inshallah ta'ala. So, program starts at 6:15. We're hoping coffee and light snacks will be there. Spread the word around. Christmas Eve. So it shouldn't be too much of a trouble for those who work or those who are college uni, because probably you'll be on holiday. Okay. That being said, let's look into today's seerah. We're at the point where the Prophet ﷺ has been commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And remember, all of this is not all of what's happening now. From, not even from the cave of Hira, I was going to say from the first revelation up until the dawah going public. None of this has been under the Prophet ﷺ's steam. This is all being orchestrated from on high by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I was going to say, it doesn't just start from Hira. The whole of the life of the Prophet ﷺ has been orchestrated, okay, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reach this very point and this very reality where the Quran is revealed to him. And for how many years was he given dawah secretly, inviting to Islam secretly? 3 years. 3 years. And then after the third year finishes, Allah commands in the Quran, and we went through it, that warn your nearest of kin. Proclaim openly what you have been commanded. And the Prophet ﷺ, as we saw last time, when he got the verse was revealed to him to warn your relatives and family and nearest kin. He organized a luncheon, and he invited some of the key family members, and he understood the words warn your nearest kin not just to mean direct family, but also uncles as well. First uncles, therefore aunties. And so they gathered around about 40 odd people, and he gave them a meal, and Abu Lahab, his uncle, was there as well, and they had a good meal. And just as the Prophet ﷺ wanted to say what he had gathered them for, tell them about the message of Islam, Abu Lahab says, this nephew of mine is going to is deceiving us all. And he kind of spoilt the atmosphere, and everyone kind of like, the whole kind of atmosphere fell apart, and everyone went on their own way. There are some narrations, and I'm not quite sure how authentic, because I didn't have a chance to kind of investigate the authenticity. But there are some narrations which say that one of the reasons why I've got a cold, yeah, alhamdulillah. One of the reasons why Abu Lahab says, he's deceiving you, is not only because he's already heard his nephew preaching Islam and calling people away from the way of the Quraysh and the way of idolatry and paganism to Abrahamic monotheism, to Tawheed. He knows that as well, but also one particular narration says that the Prophet ﷺ says to Ali radiallahu anhu, I'm going to call all my relatives around. So what you do is take this piece of meat, and it was a small piece of meat, and take this cup of milk and serve it to them. And he knows there's going to be about 40 odd people. So little meat and 1 cup of milk. And so the meat gets served first, and they're all tucking into this meat in the pot. And Ali radiallahu anhu is serving it from the pot or from some vessel, and it feeds all 40. And Abu Lahab's kind of caught on to this. And then this little bowl of milk comes, and he's scooping out milk for all the people, and it feeds 40 people. So in some narrations, it seems like Abu Lahab has caught on to this, which is a bit strange, as well as the fact that he knows what his nephew is going to say in terms of the dawah and the invitation. So for that reason, or this reason, or both reasons, he says, he's deceiving you. So they all go home, and then, as we read last time, that the Prophet ﷺ tries again the next day, and this time before Abu Lahab could say something, the Prophet ﷺ stands up, does his speech, praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and says, look, if I were to tell you that behind me, that was on Mount Safa, that, look, I'm a warner to you, O Arab tribe of this, O tribe of Quraysh, O Banu Hashim, O Banu this, O Banu that, I can't save you from the fire, it's only Allah that can save you, turn to Him, give up your idolatry. And they kind of hear the message, and Abu Lahab's getting a bit irate, as you'd expect him to get irate and angry, and he makes some kind of antagonistic remark. And Abu Talib, the kind of more elderly, calmer, reassuring figure, says, look, he's one of us. What can we do? He's one of us. He has his ideas. But surely we shouldn't be making a big deal out of this. Surely we shouldn't be abusing each other, because we're family, right? And if we start abusing each other, what do we expect from people outside? And Abu Lahab is like, we should be abusing him, because he's not on our path, and we should help others to abuse him. And Abu Talib says, Abu Talib says some words to Abu Lahab to kind of, not calm him down, but shut him up. So Abu Lahab goes away quite vexed, and the rest of the gathering breaks up. He was not quite sure, did anyone accept Islam there or not? Not quite sure. But he, sallallahu, is going out making the dawah publicly. A lot of poor people, slaves, have become Muslims. One or two of the great Qurayshi elite have become Muslims. 3 or 4 other prominent figures, but by and large, most Muslims are former slaves or still slaves. And the dawah is going on, but slowly and steadily the numbers are increasing. 1 by 1, 2 by 2, it's happening. They're praying regularly. They've been taught the form of prayer, but they've been praying in one of the kind of glens and one of the kind of valleys away from the public eye. But what happens one day is that one of the mushrikun, one of the idolaters, one of the Quraysh is walking down the valley, and he sees these people praying, and he starts shouting abuse at them. 1 or 2 of the young Muslims, after the prayer, they turn around and start shouting abuse at the mushrik's back. It gets into a verbal fight. One of the Muslims picks up a bone, and in the course of a heated verbal argument, the Muslim strikes the abusive non-Muslim, and he hits him on the jaw. He falls unconscious. There's blood there as well. He's not dead, but that's the first blood to be spilt in Islam, although he didn't die, and he just suffered a wound. But by and large, there was no command to do that. That wasn't the Prophet's instruction, that wasn't the Quranic instruction. That was just, at the beginning of the tarbiyah, at the beginning of cultivation and nurturing spiritual qualities, one could perhaps lose it. And that's what happened there. But by and large, the invitation is going on openly. The Meccan society is becoming more and more aware of the actual message. In the beginning, they think, if you can't stop him, just let him be. It'll probably phase out. It'll probably just fade away. It's a phase. And so they just went on their way. Abu Lahab and his wife, Jamil, and 1 or 2 other people, they were very angry. They wanted something to be done now. But by and large, the rest of the Meccans, he's got his thinking, we've got our thinking, he's a bit off track. And so they kind of let him be. But what begins to happen is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes clearer and clearer in the verses of the Quran the falsehood of idolatry. Not just the falsehood of idolatry, but Allah reveals simple, rational arguments, dalil aqli, to show the stupidity of idolatry. Not just the falsehood. Something could be false, but quite, rationally consistent. But this is false, irrational, and it doesn't have any legs to stand upon. Idolatry. These are the same idols that you're bowing to and making offerings to and making dua to and sacrificing to and pinning your hopes and your aspirations in the fulfillment of your needs from these idols. And quite often these idols are things that you've either made with your hands, or in some cases 1 or 2 of their big idols were just maybe a stone or a boulder that they had found somewhere in ancient days, and it looked really shiny and something out of the ordinary, so we'll take that. Or they were sometimes just as big as the size of a football. And remember, the idolatry of the Arabs, they're not idols like idols in how we see Hinduism today, where you look at it and it looks like a creature like an elephant or like a blue person or whatever. These are literally stones that are uncleft stones, that no one's chiseled them away. It's just how they naturally are. Some people would have a personal god in their own homes, personal idol, in the form of a date. Just as a date. It's been squashed date. That's the kind of mobile idol, because I can take that, pick them up, put that in my pocket, and when I go travelling, I can take my idol along, my home idol along. So there was nothing, they weren't images as we understand them. They were just literally stones, rocks, other bits and pieces like that, and those were what were being worshipped. It's important to also know that the mushrikun, the Arab idolaters, believed in Allah. They believed in Allah. The Quran is so clear on this, not once, not twice, many, many times. Which is why the Prophet's father is called Abdullah. They understood there is Allah. There is Allah, the supreme creator. In fact, there is Allah, according to the idolaters, the mushriks, as the only creator of creation. As the only maker and creator of creation, as the only one who has power over life and death. They believe this as the only one who gives them rizq, sustenance, and sends down rain from the sky, vegetation from the earth. And all of this is mentioned in for example, Surah Yunus, the 10th surah of the Quran. That if you were to ask them who created the sun and the moon, the heavens and the earth, they would say, Allah. How then are you deluded? How then are they deluded? But along with believing in Allah and offering worship to Allah, they would also offer worship to these demigods that they and their forefathers over a long course of history had invented. And quite often, the demigods, these idols or sub-gods, would be their first means of worship. And when they are, and the Quran says, if you were asked them, why do you worship these idols? In order to draw closer to Allah. We do so in order to draw closer to Allah. And what they would do, there would be sacrifices there to some of the idols. There would be offerings of appeasement, that we need to please the God. Then we can ask them for a child or victory in war or good weather for our trade caravan or whatever it be. So this is ibadah, this is an act of worship. And so they were worshipping Allah and they were worshipping others along with Allah. And that act of worshipping others along with Allah is the act of shirk. A mushrik is someone, in the case of the Qurayshi Arabs, the Meccan Arabs, is someone who believes in God, perhaps even worshipping Allah, but he's not worshipping Allah alone. He's worshipping Allah and others along with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Quran says, Inna shirka l'dhulmun azim. Indeed, shirk is the worst form of wrong, is the worst dhulm, worst wrongdoing. Because dhulm, oppression or wrongdoing, is putting something in other than its proper place. Dhulm, injustice, is putting something in other than its proper place. If I give the rights that I owe to my parents and I give those rights to my children, I've done dhulm on my parents. The rights that they should have, I've given them to someone else. The right that Allah should have, La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, okay, that He alone should be worshipped and there should be no partner with Him, has now been taken away, and the rights of Allah that He alone should be the deity to be worshipped, He alone is the one who is Lord and controller of all things, and He alone who has the attributes of perfection, and He alone is the one who can benefit and harm, is now being given to these demigods. In the English language, in a more technical term, the Arab idolaters, mushrikun, are actually called henotheists. No one uses that term anymore, but it's a correct term. Henotheism is the belief in one supreme God, but you have all of these, you have another panoply of idols under the main God. And that's really describes the mushrikun. The Prophet didn't come down and say, oh, but Prophet wasn't sent to make people believe in Allah. They already believed in Allah. Their problem was that they believed in Allah and they were worshipping others alongside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? So that was the mushrikun. And in the beginning, they're kind of leaving the Prophet alone, apart from one or two who are really irate, Abu Lahab and co. But when the Quran then starts actually attacking the belief system of the idolaters, saying this is something you and your forefathers have invented. You trace your lineage back to Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam, but Ismail alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, وَلَا تَكُنْ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. He wasn't amongst the mushrikun. He was Hanif. You know that some of your great, individual people, and we'll come to see Amr ibn Luhay is one of them, the main one, who, 5, 6, 10, 15 generations ago, whenever it was, he brought in idolatry to Makkah. After they were on the deen, the way of life of Ismail alayhi salam, which was Islam. So the Quran is coming with all these arguments that the mushrikun can't refute. It's in their own language. It's attacking them. Instead of saying, oh, well, we can refute this falsehood easily, they can't refute it. Once that begins to happen, the attack on idolatry, on shirk itself, then people are getting disgruntled. Now, people can no longer afford to just say, oh, it's just them lot. Now it's a case of, we need to do something about this, and we need to do it now. And on the one hand, they felt that using force was a bit too excessive now. On top of this, look at the reputation he has, and what will people outside of Makkah think about us, that we attack our own? And that was by and large the dominant view, that we need to do something, but certainly not yet physical violence. There were one or two who were kind of okay with the idea of physical violence, and that's something that normally happens in society. In society, whenever something happens to a society that the society doesn't generally like or doesn't approve of, most people in that society who disapprove don't have the strength or the courage to use violence. To use violence, when I use the word courage, I don't mean it in a good way. I mean it quite in a negative way. But to use violence requires a bit of courage, a bit of bottle, as they say. Okay, this is a silly example, but it will help understand the point. I remember back in the 70s when we used to have the racist organization, the National Front, the forerunner to today's right-wing racist movements. And it was the 70s. It was a day and an age in which there was a lot of racism in the police forces. There was a lot of institutional racism all over Britain. And before the blacks, it was the Irish, and along with the blacks who got it worse were the Asians. And I remember one day going to my flat in Leytonstone, and what happened was the milkman had stopped delivering milk in our flats, because what the kids used to do when milk used to be delivered outside the doors, they used to kind of put their, open the milk bottle, and then they'd spit in it, urinate in it, or whatever. So obviously and that happens with nearly anybody and everybody. So in the end, we stopped buying milk from the milkman, everybody else did, and then the milkman didn't deliver, which meant then every day you'd have to kind of go out and go and get your milk from like the local corner shop or something like that. So one day I was doing this corner shop journey, and as I was leaving my flat just to go a 5-minute walk, I noticed there were about 7 or 8 skinheads. I thought, oh, if they crossed the road, and generally they didn't, because most of my flat was full of black people. There were about 4 or 5 white families, a couple of Asian families, but most were like kind of Afro-Caribbean black. So it became a good reason not to cross. Okay. I thought, I need to get there and back onto safe territory, okay, before they can do anything. So I went there, and as I asked the shopkeeper, can I have 2 or 3 bottles of milk? I said, could I just have 1 or 2 empty bottles as well? And normally if you ask someone for an empty bottle, they understand what you're going to do with it. So I had these empty bottles, and I got to the lift, and the lift is under a roof like this. It's very dark. the light had already been busted. I'm waiting for the lift, and then I'm hearing this noise coming. So I know that these skinners have probably crossed over. They've seen me now, and they followed me before I can get in the lift. So my mind was, I've seen it done before by some of my friends. You get a bottle, I've seen it on TV. You get a bottle, smash the bottle against the seat thing, and then you hold up the bottle and you kind of threaten. I thought, perfect, it's all worked out. Quite scared, I was quite skinny as well. I was always ready for a bit of a rumble, but I was skinny. I thought, that's what I'll do. And those days you didn't have the sensibility to ask Allah, make dua to Allah, whatever. That's what I'll do. So I saw them out the corner of my eye, and one of them must have pushed one of the friends, and he pushed him into me. And this guy says, oh, and he insulted me with various names. So he said, apologize. I said, well, actually, you know, your friend pushed you into me. So I'll say sorry for your friend pushing you, but I want to apologize because I didn't bump into you. And in my mind, I'm thinking, that's not a very good way to start. But your ego and your arrogance, you know, kind of brings you to that. You're, you know, young. Anyway, he started pushing me and whatever, and then they were egging him on, do this, do that, and whatever. Then I saw a couple of them coming towards me. So I grabbed the bottle, and I knew where I was going to hit it, and I hit the bottle. And the milk bottle was that big, right? And I hit the bottle. And normally in the films, when you hit the bottle, you get that much of the bottle at least, right? I got about that much of the bottle. That much of the bottle, right? And it shook me, and it surprised me as well. And I was like, you know, and I think they must have seen and I think they were surprised as well. That's not supposed to happen like that. And so I'm holding this, but it had a jagged edge still, okay? And maybe it had already cut me, jagged edge. And in my hand, I realized my hand had frozen. Doing that was one thing, but now, am I actually going to do, if someone comes to me, am I going to do that? I realized even before they came to me, I'm frozen. I'm not going to do it. And there's one thing to have the courage to say something, the other thing to actually stab someone. Alhamdulillah, we had a caretaker, we used to call him Popeye for various reasons, a really strong guy. And he just came, he must have seen what was happening. He came and he knew me by my surname, and he must have seen me standing there in these like 6 skinheads or 5 skinheads, and he shouted and he swore abuse, and then they just ran. And then he came, and I was like still like this, like that, and he said, Sharif, let go, and then he took the thing out of my hand, and he goes, that was a silly, stupid thing to do. But actually he swore at me as well, a silly thing to do, don't do that, whatever. And fine. And as I was going up the list, I was thinking, wow, that's not really easy, is it? And I was a bit shaken. And I wasn't even shaken for the encounter. I was shaken that, oh my gosh, I froze. And I learned that valuable lesson. All my friends told me when I told them what had happened. Well, actually, the caretaker told them what happened. So by the time next day I'm with my mates, kind of half the kind of estate knows what had happened. And I got a really good piece of advice. Either you have the courage to use it, or like use a knife, or use a baseball bat, or use a broken bottle, or don't even attempt it. Because once you hold that up, you've made a serious challenge. And the only way it can be responded to is with another serious weapon, a challenge weapon. And I thought, yeah, what stupidity, kind of thing. Anyway, point being is, violence is not the choice of the average man. There are a lot of people here who don't like immigrants, but not here, in the UK, okay? But very few of them are going to be violent racists. Some of them may be racists, but they won't go to violence. Same thing with Muslims. Many Muslims have a huge problem, quite rightly so, with our government foreign policy, and by and large, Western foreign policy. Double standards. But very few will allow their anger and frustration to turn into bona fide violence. Because it takes another level to do that. And I'm not saying it's a good thing to step up, obviously it's not. So in the beginning with the mushrikun, it's we need to challenge him, but how? So they devised this plan. We'll just insult him. We'll mock him. This man, and honor in our society is predicated, depends on good reputation. People saying good things. We'll just insult him with the worst insults. We'll insult him through poetry, We'll get our wives to insult him. If we can get some of our children on board, that'd be good. And definitely we'll get the bigwigs of the society to insult him. And that's what was beginning to happen. The Prophet ﷺ was just being insulted left, right, and centre. And it wasn't just one little insult there, one little insult there. You know, in my life, going back to that same period, maybe once or twice or 3 times a week, I might have been called a Paki, right? Oh, that's big deal, okay? Once every second week, it might have been some physical trouble. You know, just being sworn at, it's not a big deal. But this is happening every day, in your face, and you're being described not with, because you know what, Paki, my parents told me from here, you know what Paki is? No, but I don't know what Paki is. I mean, other than Pakistan, okay? And we weren't even from Pakistan, we were originally from India, right? Paki is from the word Pakistan, Stan is land. Oh, okay. So what's Pak? Pak means pure. So my dad was laughing and said, when they call you Paki, they're calling you pure. And that's it. I became really happy after that, right? Okay. I went around the whole of much of the 70s. Whenever someone called me a Paki, I was thinking, mashallah, they're just calling me pure and clean. And it became easier to take. You kind of, psychologically, you twist it to your advantage, okay? I'm not saying that I was totally happy, but, you know. And it became very difficult. I want us to understand the psychology of people, of communities. And the psychology of old is still the psychology of today, okay? So they are insulting him. They're finding ways to attack his honor. You attack his honor, you attack his message automatically. You attack his message and honor, who's going to follow him then? Who's going to even listen to him? But at the moment, given his reputation of truthfulness, trustworthiness, beauty of conduct, people just want to know what he's saying. And they had to stop that. And so it was, you know, as they say, when with the inbreak of truth, when the truth breaks into society, with the inbreak of truth comes the outbreak of violence. Can't be helped. It's just the nature of the world. Right? But in the beginning, it's not physical violence. There are many things that happened to the Prophet ﷺ which were physical. Physically, he was attacked. But more than the physical attacks, he was really saddened by the verbal abuses. They tended to hurt him more. His companions were of 2 categories. The Muslims who followed him were of 2 categories. The minority who came from good families and strong family clans and tribes, so they would always have their tribal protection. Whether their tribes agreed with their religion or not, they would have tribal protection. But the majority of the Muslims were slaves or former slaves who had no tribal protection. So we will come to see in next week or the week, you know, soon, they were open prey. They were easy targets. The Prophet ﷺ had his uncle to protect him, Abu Talib, and the Banu Hashim in general. But this is what the Prophet ﷺ says in an authentic hadith in the Sunnah of Tirmidhi. He ﷺ said, لَقَدْ أُوذِيتُ فِي اللَّهِ مَا يُؤْذَى أَحَدٍ. I was harmed for the sake of Allah in a way that no one like me has been harmed. وَلَقَدْ أُخِفْتُ فِي اللَّهِ مَا يُخَافُ أَحَدٍ. And I have been terrorized, put in fear for the sake of Allah in a way that no one else has ever been put in fear. وَلَقَدْ أتت علي ثالثة ومالي ولبلال طعام يأكله ذو كبد إلا ما وراء إبط بلال. And once 3 days passed, and neither Bilal nor I had any food to eat that could have been fit for any human being to eat, except the food that Bilal managed to hide under his armpit. Otherwise we were starved of food. These were the levels of harm and attack on the early Muslims and the Prophet ﷺ in particular. That's in the Sunan of Ibn Majah. Another time the Prophet ﷺ, this is in the hadith in the Musnad of Ahmad, another time the Prophet ﷺ, one of the Sahaba says, قال رأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في جاهلية في سوق ذي المجاز. I once saw the Prophet ﷺ in one of the markets of Dhul Majaz, and this is like in Hajj time. where you're going to get lots of people. وهو يقول, and the Prophet was saying, يا أيها الناس قولوا لا إله إلا الله تفلحوا. O people, testify to La ilaha illallah, tuflihu, and you'll be saved and you'll be successful. And that's another thing. He was inviting to La ilaha illallah. The Quran was coming down with attacks on idolatry and to show the beauty of Tawheed, monotheism. And he's inviting to this La ilaha illallah. And they knew La ilaha illallah didn't mean, oh, there is only one God. They knew that, the Arabs knew that's not what La ilaha illallah meant. And they knew that La ilaha illallah didn't mean, oh, believe in God, Allah, because they were already on the belief of Allah. They knew La ilaha illallah was La ma'bood bihaqqin illallah. None has the right, none deserves to be worshipped except Allah. Meaning, throw away all your false gods. Worship only Allah. And that was their problem with his message. Yeah, they had a bit of a problem that he was too generous and too lenient to slaves. Yeah, he had a bit of problem that, he's insulting some of their forefathers or their way of their forefathers. But their biggest thing was, he's telling us that our deen and our religion and worship is all wrong. All these gods, Allat, Al-Uzza, Al-Manat, all of these are batil. This is what really irked them and jacked up their backs. So the Prophet is saying, say La ilaha tuflihu, and be successful. That's another thing. When we're going to invite someone to the deen, some people are very spiritual. They just will go for the truth for the sake of the truth. Is it the truth? Yes. Some people, they need a bit more encouragement. Here is the truth, but they need an incentive to leave their former position. So tuflihu, be successful. Tell them. So the Quran says, look, if you become a Muslim, you'll get this, and there's paradise, and there's the pleasure of Allah, and there's this, and there's that, because some people are like that, and they need to be given that incentive. For others, it's for a minority, it's just you tell them the truth, and you tell them this is Allah's way, they'll accept it. So in our calling out to others, we need to see what incentives are we giving them. Which is why the old 70s and 80s dawah, let's call them to the economic beauty of Islam and the political beauty of Islam. And look, the whole world, including the Muslims, look at current Muslim countries as economic and political failures. Since, if you say to a non-Muslim, Islam will invite you to economic, political beauty, right, and make that be the core of your message, immediately they think majority Muslim lands. And they don't see anything economic or politically beautiful there. So the Quran doesn't do that. The Quran actually invites towards, look, you'll be prosperous in the hereafter, and who knows what blessings you'll get in this world. But definitely you'll be prosperous in the eternal life. And that's the third thing we learn, is that قُولُوا لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Invite to the oneness of Allah first. Not to some political point of Islam, even though that might need to be mentioned, not to some economic point of Islam, that might need to be mentioned, but to the underlying spiritual and creedal, aqidah values and suluk values of the deen. The things to do with the heart, the beliefs and the actions of the heart. That's what he was calling them to, and he wasn't calling them to anything else. So, قُولُوا لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ تُفْلِحُوا. Say La ilaha illallah and be successful. وَالنَّاسِ مُجْتَمِعُونَ عَلَيْهِ, and people gathered around him, as this companion is reporting. وَوَرَاءَهُ رَجُلٌ وَدِعُ الْوَجْهِ, and behind him, following him around wherever he was going, was this person who had a really radiant or a shiny face. ذُو غَدِيرَتَيْن أَحْوَلُ ذُو غَدِيرَتَيْن. He was kind of slightly squinty or boss-eyed, and he had two braids, two locks. يَقُولُ إِنَّهُ صَابِيٌ كَاذِبٌ. And whenever the Prophet was saying, say La ilaha illallah, this man behind him was saying, he is an apostate and he is a liar. He is an apostate and he is a liar. And he kept on saying then, يَتْبَعُهُ حَيْثُ ذَهَبَ. And this man followed the Prophet around wherever the Prophet went, saying exactly this, trying to put off people from listening to the Prophet. فَسَأَلْتُ عَنْهُ فَذَكَرُوا إِلَى نَسِبِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. So this companion who's narrating this, so I asked, because it's the first time he saw what was going on. So I asked, does this man have any relation with the Prophet? Is he kind of related to the Prophet? وَقَالُوا لِي, and it was said to me, هَذَا عَمَّهُ أَبُو لَهَبْ. This is his uncle, Abu Lahab. Abu Lahab just couldn't tolerate. He was told by Abu Talib and many others of the clan, look, just be cool about it. But no. He's got a sharp tongue. He's got a fiery temper. His wife is just as sharp and fiery. And from the day one, when in Safar, he's trying to, invite them, and he said, "Oh, curse you, is this what you invited us for?" And then Tabbat Yada Abi Lahabin wa Tab comes down, as we saw last time. So Abu Lahab is doing this. So the Prophet ﷺ's got no peace in that sense. Wherever he's going, and if Abu Lahab can insult him, if he can get someone of his friends to insult him, that's what's happening. And after a little while, as thick-skinned as you are, it can and does quite often take its toll. And we haven't got time now, but on this page, right, there's about 12 or 13 verses of the Quran from the early chapters where Allah is saying that Allah knows that you are saddened by what they are saying about you. وَلَا يُكَذِّبُونَكَ, but they're not rejecting you. وَلَكِنْ الظَّالِمِينَ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ يَجْحَدُونَ, but these wrongdoers, they are rejecting the verses of Allah, the revelation. And the Quran will very intimately tell the Prophet ﷺ that, you are not anything like they are saying. You are honored. You are the messenger of God, a messenger to all the world, to all the people. And by this way, the Prophet ﷺ's wahi, Allah in the Quran is reassuring the Prophet ﷺ. He's strengthening his heart, reassuring him, reminding him that, well, look, if everyone else turns away from you, but I won't turn away from you because you're my Habib. Okay, and these things are strengthening the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. Otherwise, he's getting this constant barrage of insults. When Tabbat Yada, perished be the hands of Abu Lahab, that surah came down. Jamil, which is the wife of Abu Lahab, her actual name is Arwa. Awra. Awra Jamil. When she hears that the new religion of the Prophet ﷺ has come with these lines of poetry, because that's what she believes. She doesn't believe it's from Allah. She believes that the Prophet ﷺ or someone is inventing these poetical lines. So she comes out, storming out of a house. And a woman scorned is like kind of not the best person to be in the path of a woman scorned. Okay, easy to take on a heavyweight boxer than a woman scorned, right? So she comes out and she's got a stone in her hand, and she's cursing and angry, and she's on fire, and she's heard that the Prophet ﷺ is in the haram with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And she's coming and she says, مُذَمَّمٌ عَبَيْنَا وَدِينُهُ قُلَيْنَا وَأَمَرُهُ عَسَيْنَا. He criticizes our forefathers, and he insults our religion, and he just wants to disobey our way of life and our lifestyle. And the Prophet ﷺ is sitting in the Masjid al-Haram with Abu Bakr, and he's reciting Quran. And then فَلَمَّا رَآهَا Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr sees her coming, sees Jamil coming. قال يا رسول الله قد أقبلت وأنا أخاف أن تراق. She's coming, and I fear that she's going to see you. Because it's one thing being insulted by a man, and it'd be difficult to be insulted by, because if you might say something to a man, worse comes to worse, if you're that way inclined, you could come to blows with a man, but in the end, hey, you're not going to be blamed too much. Okay, with a woman, it's just like you're just entirely in a different level, which is why when it comes to marriages, and when there are marital arguments between husband and wife, it's always seen, our ulama always say that the actual overall teachings of Islam tell us that the man has been given instinctively certain qualities that he should just step back. Whether he's right or whether he's wrong, he shouldn't go in for it. If his wife continues like that, and she's one of those women by nature who wants to, whatever, then khalas, he should step back in a way that calms the situation down. Not someone who makes it worse. And that's considered to be a mark of a man. And to do other than that is never considered to be a mark of a man in Islam vis-a-vis wife. Okay, vis-a-vis wives. Point being is, because women and dealing with them is just a total different kettle of fish. So Abu Bakr says, like, I'm afraid that she may see you. So, you know, and the Prophet ﷺ says, Innaha lan tarani. Don't worry, she won't see me. Okay, he's in the Kaaba, it's a big open courtyard, right? It's not surrounded by the things that it's surrounded by. Jamil is here, and the Prophet ﷺ is probably just twice this distance, right? And she's cursing and fiending and swearing. إنها لن تراني. She won't see me. وقرأ قرآنا ائتسم به كما قال تعالى وإذا قرأت القرآن جعلنا بينك وبين الذين لا يؤمنون بالآخرة حجابا مستورا. The Prophet then recited certain verses of the Quran. And according to the one verse in the Quran, إذا قرأت القرآن, when you recite the Quran, جعلنا بينك وبين الذين لا يؤمنون بالآخرة حجابا مستورا. Allah will set up between you and the one who doesn't believe in the hereafter, hijab and mastura, a veil that will make you unseen or that will hide you. So he recites some Quran. Jamil comes straight up to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and says, "Where's your friend who's just writing poetry to insult me?" And the Prophet is right next to Abu Bakr. They haven't moved. Where the Prophet was sitting, he's still sitting there. Abu Bakr is just probably standing at that time, but he's right there, and she doesn't see him. And Abu Bakr says, "Wallahi, he hasn't written anything or to insult you." Okay, and she says, "Well, you know, when you'd see him, you know, that kind of thing." And she goes off. In one narration, she's doing this, having this conversation whilst trying to do tawaf as well, because she's kind of like, you know, she's a dignified, noble woman, so she knows if she comes to the haram, she has to do some tawaf, okay? So she's cursing the Prophet whilst trying to do tawaf, and in doing so as well, she falls over her own robe as well, trips over, which is quite undignified for a noble woman to kind of trip up in public. So Abu Bakr says, "Look, you know, wala la wa rabba hadha al-bayt, by Allah, by Lord of this house, ma hajaka." He's not been cursing you. He's not been insulting you. And she just says, "تقول قد علمت قريش أني بنت سيدها," and just remember that I am married to one of the noble leaders of the Quraysh. And I'm a noble woman, right? I've got a right to be angry. So those things were happening, where the Prophet feels that he can't meet the attacker, so he's actually hiding. And there are, in the early days, there are a number of incidences like this, which I think we'll stop up there. We're just getting the idea now. These are really just beginnings of antagonization. And what we really need to think of is this: look, if this message was the product of a man, of a human being, of the Prophet, surely political and social understanding would make it that, well, maybe I won't say too much about the idols. After all, before the Quran started really having a go at idolatry, the Quraysh kind of tolerated him. They tolerated him, right? But once they got to the very foundations of their belief and their way of life, then they can't take it anymore. Then their tolerance begins to wither away. As long as we Muslims don't say anything about the foundations of Iman and the belief of a paradise and an eternal hellfire, and that the people of La ilaha illallah are honoured by God, and the people who reject La ilaha illallah are Inna Allah la yuhibbul kafirun. And as long as we don't say anything too much about the foundations of this way of life, liberal democracy, which is really people will decide what is halal and haram. Today, you know, we have to, as a society, we know that it's now illegal to, not only illegal to harm homosexuals, but it's actually now illegal to even begin to have an opposition to them without being homophobic. Why? Because the idea is, in a liberal democracy, to give as many freedoms, liberal freedoms, to as many people as you want. But quite often what happens when you give liberal freedoms to one set of people, sometimes you take freedoms away from another set of people. So traditional Christians, many Muslims, traditional Muslims, when we say something, we're accused of Islamophobia. But liberal democracy has built into it that even though today it's absolutely unlawful, but there's nothing stopping a liberal democracy in the future allowing a brother to marry his own sister or a mother to marry her own son. At the moment, incest, it's totally illegal. But if there's enough people that want it and they're not harming anybody else, there's nothing stopping a liberal democracy to make it law. And on and on and on. So at some level, we have huge problems with the disbelief of society, let alone some of the social and ethical issues of society. As long as we don't say anything, we probably will be tolerated. We'll be probably tolerated. But if we don't say anything, we betray our covenant with Allah to live La ilaha illallah and to communicate La ilaha illallah to other people. And the first lot of major immigrants that came here in the late 50s, I'm talking about the Muslim immigrants, okay, late 50s, but more so the 60s, and then we had in the 70s again a huge influx, and then it continues. Many who came initially for just migration purposes, for economic reasons, whatever idea they had, but we now understand that we have to live our lives trying to communicate the message. Best done by following the guidelines of the scholars so that we don't get some young, foolish bull in a china shop saying things, as they quite often do, out of context, out of priority. But look, this is a nation that has lost its religious sense. Even its Christian heritage is quite often mocked. Christians on TV are mocked far more than Muslims. Had 9/11 not happened the way it did, Christians would be the most mocked community religiously. What I'm trying to say is people mocking us at Muslims, not only because we're Muslims, but because we follow a religious tradition. They're still mocking Christians as well. And the only reason that they tend not to mock Jews is because Jews have a fantastic way of protesting and setting up bodies to say that, oh, you're being anti-Semitic. Rightfully or wrong. And more of this is likely to come as economies falter, as the world becomes less safer, as more and more people are moving from certain parts of the world to more economic prosperous parts of the world, and as governments try to think, oh, how do we control this immigration thing? As indigenous people feel, what's going on? Everybody foreign is getting houses and jobs, and I, as an indigenous person, I'm not getting anything. All of these, there's complex factors around. They're not simple factors. There are truths, falsehood, greys in between. It's a complex thing. But all of that is deadly fuel to the fire, to an existing fire. We Muslims should be clear that we would love, and it's just part of our life, to communicate the message of Iman. And to at least show people the choice and the consequences between Iman and Kufr, faith and disbelief. Tawheed should be our main concern. As regards to certain political issues, they should be part of our message only in as much as it doesn't harm the central message of Tawheed. But if someone's going to be put off with the message of La ilaha illallah because of some side political issue of Islam, even if it's halal issue and a fard issue of Islam, but it can't cover the issue of La ilaha illallah, in an age in which atheism seems to be growing in Western Europe, in an age in which people don't even have any religious vocabulary anymore. They don't even have religious understanding. In an age in which you can get well-known screenwriters, Hollywood screenwriters, Ridley Scott, so you can literally rewrite a biblical story, Noah or Moses. Once upon a time in this country, someone rewrites it because he didn't just write it, he rewrote it, so it's actually not what the Bible says. And the whole thing about Moses' message, it's probably not there in the film, or Noah, it's probably not there. It's just like another epic. It's just like Transformers or one of those action movies just with old people of the olden times. Right? Once upon a time, if someone done this in this country, there would have been uproar by the people of this country. Okay? And the last great Moses film of the, 1950s or whatever, Parting of the Waters and all that, Cecil B. DeMille kind of thing. Okay, I can't remember who was the famous.
Commandments.
Yeah, but who was the famous film star there?
Charlton Heston.
Charlton Heston, right? At least it was very truthful to the actual biblical narrative. Okay, what I'm saying is when society's reached a level that really doesn't care about God and holiness anymore, that's a thing in the past. That's all. Then you and I know that it's going to be difficult. But we weren't here to think that things would be easy, unless we were just here for money and dunya. And that's what we think of our lives. But maybe, just a maybe, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He stopped the Muslim army in 711. 100 years after the Prophet ﷺ, Islam moves out of that Arabian Peninsula. And within 100 years, the Muslim armies reach halfway into France, the French Pyrenees. By that time, the Muslim armies have lost steam. They're kind of on their last legs, like that. So it's really a very shadow of the, very pale shadow of the army that was armies. But by that time, Islam has reached India, Sindh, has gone up to China, has gone across to West Africa, will be going up to Spain, and it's gone into the French Pyrenees. That's like kind of halfway through France. And they get stopped and defeated. And Europe says, oh my gosh, these Saracens, these Muslims, they don't call us Muslims, they call us Saracens. We need to do something, otherwise they're going to take over all of us. And so Europe has a reason to stop fighting and killing each other and to actually unite for common cause. Europe begins to unite at some level for the common cause of Islam. And European identity that begins to evolve over the next few hundred years is evolving in opposition to whatever Islam is. Europe is going to be something different. The Muslims help European identity. 711. Khalas. End of Muslim incursion into this part of Western Europe. 1980s. By 1980, there are millions and millions of us over Western Europe. 4 or 5 or 6 million in France, 7 or 8 million in Germany, 9 odd million or 10 odd million in the United States, 2 to 3 million here. That's a lot of people. The thing that, from the divine wisdom that couldn't be done through a sword, is actually now being done just by Muslims trying to live a simple Muslim life, hopefully in their simple Muslim ways. Indigenous people are converting. Things were merrily going along at some steady pace throughout the 80s, throughout the 90s, and then you had some hotheads and 9/11 and the post-9/11 world. Maybe we are here to take Europe back to a godly way. Whatever that godly way is, maybe it's not Islam, maybe it's being a bit more Christian and a bit more godly. Maybe it is Islam. But at the moment, Europe is just ungodly, and its morals are declining as well. Once upon a time, a nation that was godly, Christian godly, very God-fearing Christian godly, good morals, and when people had bad morals, society felt it. Oh, look at those. Now it's like, maybe we Muslims, that's how the wisdom of Allah doing this. that we're here to remind people of Allah. And we have, in one sense, whether we've intended it or not. Allah is a big conversation. God is now a conversation on front pages of tabloid things, quite often in a negative way, negative portrayal of Islam and. But God has now been brought into the conversation. Whereas in the 1960s and 70s, they were thinking by the time we reach 1990, no one will be speaking about God. And the children of former first generation Muslims, they'll probably be part of our way of life. It turned out to be totally opposite. Allah has a divine plan. If we just live our lives according to the basic halal and harams, with beauty of character, with sincerity of purpose to Allah, with sincerity of commitment to the welfare of people, subhanallah, Allah's, and to help heal spiritually diseased hearts, the disease of kufr, but also the disease of arrogance, of consumerism, and all those other spiritual diseases of the heart. If we're just tending to those diseases ourselves in our hearts and just help others, you know what? It's the nature of human beings that they soon come to know that there is something missing in their lives. Society will soon come to realize that, you know what? This isn't very healthy for us. They will look for an alternative. And what will happen is some political thinkers and philosophers and whatever, they'll chalk out another path. Unless Muslims can say, yeah, look, this is a successful way of life and it gives us ultimate success in the hereafter. This is what we were created to be. But we can't give them something that they think is Asian. You see, when you become a Muslim, you have to eat curry and you have to wear shalwar khamis. We can't give them something that tells them that when you become a Muslim, you have to become an Arab. Right, okay? You have to start drinking Bebsi and then, and have a fat belly and then start looking at anyone who's not from noble birth. And if you're black, God forbid, let me show you the Arab racism that there is in Arabs. As if they've got anything to cheer for themselves. A'udhu billah. We need to show Islam is universal. It fits a black man, it fits a brown man, it fits a yellow man, it fits a pink man. Anywhere on this planet, Islam is livable without becoming an Asian, an Arab, a West African. But the Sunnah is universal. Then they may see something. But all of these foolish people, they're foolish. It's not just that they're foolish, but you know when you think, oh, let's have a go at the troops, the British troops coming back from Iraq or whatever, the murderers and. Even if there was a logical, a logic to the point, and there isn't, because troops are always generally subservient to command, the command chain, generally. That's how it's even been in the Muslim tradition. But even if there was a logic to it, does that actually make clear the issue of Tawheed? Because wallahi, a fool, a wretched, a scumbag is he who through his rationalization or intellectualization, his whims and desires, portrays Islam in a way that causes people to be averse from the name of Allah Jalla wa Ala. The Quran says, do not insult the idols of the idolaters. So the Quran is not insulting them, the Quran is showing the falsehood. It's not just having a go at them for the sake of it. It's showing them step by step that, look, think it through, why it's false. Okay? The Quran says, do not abuse the idols of the idolaters unless they abuse Allah in return. And many groups who think they're political, they are the most ignorant in politics, let alone Sharia. And if there was a Khilafah, they would be the first to be whipped and imprisoned because of their fasad and their fitna. But it's not enough we need to move out with courage, without being wishy-washy, without painting Islam that, oh yeah, there's no difference between Islam and kufr. Really? There is. Islam is Islam and kufr is kufr. But in a way that, by the grace of Allah, we need to reach out. If we don't do this, maybe the wisdom that Allah put us here, we lost that purpose. Allah says, here is a golden opportunity to make my deen reach that your great forefathers okay, in 7-Eleven couldn't do. What an opportunity to do the role of the prophets in dawah, and we don't do it. All I'm interested in is, can I get a bigger house? Can I get more money? Can I? That's us. But we have so much more opportunity. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He give us wisdom, He give us courage, He gives us compassion to deal with our people in this country, to be to them a good example and a courageous example. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide these people to Islam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He give us tawfiq to live under the banner of the Book and the Sunnah, and die under the banner of the Book and the Sunnah, and to make our last word La ilaha illallah. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Any questions before we call it a 2-week break, inshallah? Yes, my brother.
So the word Allah, you say it was there before the Quran or before the Prophet?
Before Islam, yeah.
So is Allah simply means God in Arabic, or does it have another background? Does it come from Ibrahim's time or Moses' time?
Okay, so the word Allah is the name of Allah, and all prophets knew Allah. But in language, it gets changed, okay? The Bible at one time, or at least one of the translations of the Bible, will say that apparently Jesus Christ, when He's on the cross, in Calvary, says something like Eli, Eli. Okay, very similar to Allah, Allah. So we believe that Allah is the name of the one true God, Allah the Creator, and that prophets and the messengers knew that. But through language, it becomes changed. For example, in the time of not taking Allah, but taking another name, we say Musa. In Arabic, it's Musa. But Hebrew, the language that Musa was speaking, they wouldn't say Sir, they would say Sha. So he was Musha, okay, or Moshe. Okay, that's, if we went and called him Musa, he would find, oh, that's a strange way of saying my name, and he would know that we were foreign. People would say Moshe. Likewise, they wouldn't say Isa, nor would they say Jesus. Putting a J on an I is a Latin thing. They would say Yisa with a Ya. That's probably his name, how everyone around him called him. But once words move into different languages, same thing with Allah. By the time it might have thousands of years moved in, but otherwise everyone was instinctively created to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that was the original religion, the religion of Allah al-Islam. As regards to just a nice point, where does the word Allah come from itself, the actual word? Then the scholars of Aqeedah have two opinions. Allah is a unique name to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they say it doesn't come from, it's not derived. It's not mushtaq, it's not derived from it, it's just a name. Boom. Okay? And the other word is no, Allah actually is a derived name. It comes from al-ilah, the deity, meaning the true deity. And they say it, and also they say it may come from Aliyah, to be totally perplexed and dumbfounded. Because if you just think about Allah and like how was Allah, it's like, whoa, the mind just gets blown away. So either al-ilah, which is the common and popular understanding, or Aliyah, or it's no, just Allah, it's just a unique name. But it is the name for Allah, and none other has the right to that name. We can be Abdullah, slave of Allah, and we can be Abdul, any of his names, beautiful names, Abdul Rahman, Abdul Wahhab, but no one can have Allah except Allah Jalla wa Ala. Okay? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq, subhanallah wa bihamdi, subhanallah wa bihamdi, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. I'll see you in 2 weeks' time, but it'll be really nice. 24th, Christmas Eve, 6:15. Let's please be here, spread it around. Look forward to seeing you there, inshallah. How are you? You okay?
You said 2 weeks, but you mean
I'll give it a day or two.
Let me know anyway.
3 weeks, isn't it?
Or you can check if you haven't.
Yeah. No, I think you gave it to me last time.
Oh, yeah, you saved it.
Okay. Barakallah feekum. We'll see you soon.
Excuse me, you said 2 weeks, but you mean 3 weeks, because
Probably mean 3 weeks, yeah. But you'll get the text round, inshallah. Yeah, probably do mean 3 weeks. You're right, yeah.